I had every faith our paths would cross again, Arisen.
It is about time we pressed on, wouldn't you say, Master?
Dragon's Dogma 2 is not just the sequel to one of my favorite games of all time. It's also a do-over. People have asked me before the game came out, do you need to play Dragon's Dogma 1 in order to play Dragon's Dogma 2? And I always told them no, because it looked like from the previews that this was an attempt at not a remake, but just a straight-up do-over. I could not have possibly prepared myself for how true that statement was when I hit the game's title screen, which looks like this. Not Dragon's Dogma 2, just Dragon's Dogma. Again. But better this time. In case you're not caught up to speed, Dragon's Dogma 2 is a pretty weird game. Just like its original prequel and the expansion later, Dark Arisen, it's a fake multiplayer RPG in which you and your team of 3 extra pawns, particularly your main pawn, go on adventures and fight the titular dragon in the end. This is going to include goblins, cyclops, trolls, chimera, griffin, drakes, green slimes, and the like. You'll be creating and controlling your Arisen, your main character, but much more importantly is your main pawn. The long and short of it is that your main pawn is going to be a completely uncontrollable creative character that is going to be accompanying you every single step of the way. In addition, you'll be able to send out your main pawn to accompany other people in their games, where they'll learn how to complete quests, fight monsters, and bring back items. The pawn system is weird. It's really strange. Looking at Dragon's Dogma footage, you would expect this game to be multiplayer, but it is absolutely obsessed with being single player, to the point of making and training fake people to go on adventures with you. But at the end of the day, being able to create your own perfect buddy and have your friends play with that perfect buddy is a fucking blast. I have to say, I'm extremely grateful to Capcom for providing a review code nearly 2 weeks before the game's official release. However, despite the fact that this was intended for review, the possibility of me actually getting through the game in that time period was ridiculous. There are a lot of reasons I could possibly give you for this. I'm very busy, the game's huge, but I feel like it would be better to show you, and I have 2 primary examples. The first of which is an early quest you can get inside the main capital city. You're tasked by a random passerby in order to figure out how the terrible bard with awful, awful delivery is able to make any money at all because he's just horrible. I looked around, I tried to see if there were any quest markers, and I have to admit, I was a little stumped and could only come to the conclusion that I was pretty much going to have to watch him all day. So I did. This is footage of me watching that bard for literally an entire day until he decided to leave and go home, at which point I figured out more of the quest. This entire ordeal took me almost 40 minutes. And at the end, despite getting 2 different ways to solve the quest put into my quest log, I figured out a third way by accident to solve it. And I don't know if that was any good. But I had fun. I had so much fun standing around waiting for this guy to leave. Because the game's world is realized, and it takes you seriously.
Rejoice, my darling, for your Albert is returned.
Welcome home, dear.
I spend my days spinning yarns, only to come home to a wife for whose radiance I have no words. If there is a more fortunate fool in the city, I have yet to meet him.
Oh, you bold-faced flatterer.
It takes you so seriously, in fact, that it allows you to make mistakes and then demands that you fix those mistakes. A perfect example is even earlier, prior to getting to the capital. You are tasked with the journey to the capital. Along the way, you'll defeat a Cyclops.
You have my gratitude, sir.
And then be offered the ability to use an ox cart to fast travel the rest of the way there. Me, a veteran of the first game, said, no way. Why would I take a fast travel and skip all that exploration? How far could it possibly be? Well, it's far. It's really far. It took me over an hour to get to the capital, and I was ambushed multiple times and nearly died when a troll kicked my ass. I couldn't believe how far apart these 2 basic locations were and how seriously the game demanded I take actually traveling to and from them. To the point where most of the footage from the rest of this preview is going to be chopped up bits of that horrible, horrible trip to the capital that I couldn't have enjoyed more. So what's up with that? The distances are long and fights are tough. What's the big deal? Well, Dragon's Dogma is a strange game. It offers you up these features that you would assume are flaws in anything else. Fast travel is difficult to unlock and insanely expensive, or in some cases unreliable. Inventory weight crushes your character, making them slower and slower and fight more and more weakly, draining more stamina if you picked up a lot of health items. Nighttime is absolutely vicious, and you can't see more than 10 feet in front of your face. It's the kind of game that demands itself to be taken seriously, but unlike a lot of the survival type games that you would associate with these kinds of punishing mechanics, it's made by a team of talented action game developers, notably Hideaki Itsuno over at Capcom. And what you end up with is something completely different. It's a strange mix of extremely serious role-playing with inscrutable and difficult to decipher requirements, backed up by action gameplay that is some of the best in general around. There's no game that feels or acts or sounds or believes in itself like Dragon's Dogma or Dragon's Dogma 2. It's just weird. And it loves itself. And I love it right back. There were some initial concerns I had when I saw preview footage and I saw that some of the old vocations, that's Dragon's Dogma's word for classes or jobs, aren't going to be returning. There's going to be no ranger. There's going to be no assassin. After spending about 15 to 20 hours with the game, I can't say that I miss them. Nearly every single skill that I could possibly have imagined being ported into a vocation like Gouge for Assassin or Lyncian Sight for Ranger has just been rolled into the base classes. On top of that, things that used to require skill combinations are now part of default movesets. I absolutely couldn't believe when I was using my pawn, who was a fighter, and saw that Tusk Toss, one of my favorite moves as a fighter in Dragon's Dogma 1, is now just part of the core moveset. You don't need to assign it, it's just there forever. On top of this, the game's notably harder than the first game, or at least it is in my experience. Small enemies don't stagger very easily, and outside of the fighter and maybe the thief, vocations have few defensive options. Though mages getting Anodyne, the healing skill, as a class skill that they can never lose is pretty cool. Despite the fact that I was only having to equip 2 characters with gear, I found myself nearly completely broke at all times. In some cases, offering to just maybe get a chest piece and some shitty pants to tide me over, which is great because gear is the #1 way that you're going to be increasing your stats. Dragon's Dogma 1 had a very annoying quirk in this respect, in which whatever stats you gained in a vocation, say mage or ranger, would build those stats that would be good for that vocation onto your character forever. This led to some really bizarre behavior that I can't possibly believe was intentional, in which it was optimal to level something like 199 levels of sorcerer in order to make the best magic archer because they had the best magic attack growth. This behavior is gone. When you switch to a different vocation, the class stats that came with those levels are just going to switch right along with it, and there's no need to worry. If you want to mix and match with your vocations and get some cool augments or just try something new, there's absolutely nothing stopping you for you or your pawn. Speaking of pawns, I feel like they've really nailed it. The original pawn system in Dragon's Dogma had some really cool aspects to it, but it did suffer from some glaring flaws. Using commands on your pawns could influence their inclination, which meant that sometimes if you tried to tell your pawns what to do, you would end up teaching them to be terrible. There were weird personality effects, like telling a mage to heal consistently would lead them to healing exclusively, or some pawns becoming kleptomaniac insane people and just running around picking up items instead of helping you fight a cyclops or an ogre. This is a lot better in the second game. You can choose from 4 very clear and straightforward inclinations right at the start, and any bonus behaviors that you would want to add, like looking for items or using healing items on other party members, or being able to sell items themselves without having to go back to town, can just be added on later as upgrades if you do quests for people that allow them. Honestly, I found that the pawns in Dragon's Dogma 2 were a lot more reliable. They knocked down enemies more often, they ran ahead or hung back when they needed to, and they've added a new system to pawns being able to tell you where to go and what to do in quests. If you are traveling with a pawn who knows what the hell you're doing, they will tell you out loud, and a big palm symbol will appear next to their name. If you hit the go prompt by hitting up on the D-pad, they'll just take you where you need to go if they know how to do that quest. It's a massive, massive improvement on the original game using pawns to just fill in your quest log. And overall, their battle behavior is a lot easier to understand and a lot more reliable. I often found pawns running ahead and finishing some small combats for me. A couple goblins here or there, maybe out of the way cyclops that I wasn't really paying attention to because I was looking for items. The pawns will handle it. So you've been looking at the game for a while and you can see that it's gorgeous. I played the game on PC and did not play it on console. I heard that the console version is fine, but does suffer from an unstable frame rate. More than anything, the game's use of wind is what impressed me the most. The early areas of the game are incredibly brush-filled. There's tons of trees, grass, bushes, all sorts of foliage everywhere. However, this means when you're fighting a Cyclops, or a troll is gearing up for a massive wind-up punch, or one of your sorcerers is casting a spell, you're gonna see grass and trees go absolutely crazy, and it reacts incredibly well with the lighting. It looks fantastic. It looks fantastic all the time, even if its incredible low fantasy, super serious, harsh lighting aesthetic isn't super to your tastes. As for sound, the music's fantastic, it's bombastic, but most of the time it's not there. Most of the time you're going to be running around listening to your pawns, and all you're going to hear is them chattering away. They've made some steps to improve the pawn tendency to say the same thing over and over again. They don't tell you that wolves hunt in packs quite as often. They don't tell you that Saurians and their ilk dislike fire and ice both. But they do talk a lot about other Arisen they've hung out with. Like a lot. They've told me about Arisen who only hire women or only hire Beastren over and over and over and over again. Overall, the frequency of dialogue from pawns is about the same. They don't say the same things quite as often as the first game, but it is still pretty funny listening to them repeat things over and over and over in a completely peaceful, placid meadow where nothing's going on. I could honestly go on in all sorts of nitty-gritty technical details about the way the game works, like how there are now bugs that will, if eaten, can increase your pawn's carrying capacity or your carrying capacity, or the way that switching items works once you've switched vocations, or how the journey from vocation rank 5 to 6 seems like the longest rank up you could possibly do in the entire game. It's insane. It's absolutely crazy. I just want to be rank 6 thief. I want the new moves. Anyway, that's not here or there nor there. Dragon's Dogma 2 is an incredible game. It is also an extremely abrasive, weird game. I described Witcher 1 as a fucked up game for crazy people, and I stand by that. And I also stand by the fact that Witcher 1 is great. I say that Dragon's Dogma Original, or Dark Arisen, is my favorite 7 out of 10 game of all time. Dragon's Dogma 2 is not a 7 out of 10. It is incredible. It is finished. It is filled with love and care and detail. It is also absolutely not for everybody. It demands your time. It demands failure. It demands you put up with a certain degree of annoyance. But if you are willing to embrace those things, it is a deep, rich, and incredibly well-playing action RPG that everybody should try.
This world is connected to innumerable other realms beyond the rift, which pawns, such as myself, are able to traverse. My kind is duty-bound to serve you, Arisen, and to use the knowledge we glean in these distant worlds to your benefit. I myself look forward to travelling alongside you and using my experiences beyond the rift to enrich your adventures.